Picture this, the late 19th century. The British Empire, the most powerful military force on the planet, stretching its influence across the globe. They were unstoppable, right? Their red-coated soldiers and advanced rifles had conquered continents. But what if I told you? There was a war they just couldn't win. A place where the might of the empire was brought to its knees. This isn't some alternate history. This is the story of a conflict in Sudan that shattered the illusion of British invincibility. It all began in the 1880s. A charismatic religious leader named Muhammad al-Mahdi proclaimed himself the Mahdi, the prophesied redeemer of Islam. He united the disparate tribes of Sudan with a single, powerful message to drive out the foreign occupiers and purify their land. His followers, known as the Ansar or Dervishes, were armed with little more than swords, spears, and unwavering faith. Against them stood the disciplined, rifle-wielding Anglo-Egyptian forces. Backed by the industrial might of Britain, on paper, it was a mismatch. A colonial policing action that should have been over in weeks. But the Mahdi's forces were not just a rabble. They were a fervent, highly motivated army fighting on their home turf. They knew the desert like the back of their hand, the scorching heat, the blinding sandstorms, the hidden wells. This was their greatest advantage. The British, with their heavy wool uniforms and long supply lines snaking back to Cairo, were completely out of their element. The desert itself became a weapon, draining their strength and morale day by day. The first major shock came in 1883 at the Battle of Omdurman. An Egyptian force of over 10,000 men, led by a retired British officer named William Hicks, marched confidently into the desert to crush the Mahdist rebellion. They were ambushed and utterly annihilated. Almost the entire force was wiped out. News of the disaster sent shockwaves through London. The British public, used to hearing of glorious victories, was stunned. How could savages with spears defeat a modern army? This forced Britain's hand. They sent one of their most celebrated heroes, General Charles Chinese Gordon, to the capital city of Khartoum. His mission was to evacuate the Egyptian garrison and civilians before the Mahdi's forces arrived. But Gordon was a man of immense pride and stubbornness. Instead of evacuating, he decided to fortify the city and make a stand, convinced he could hold out until a relief force arrived. He vastly underestimated his enemy. For 10 long months, Gordon and his small garrison were besieged in Khartoum. The Mahdi's army, now numbering in the tens of thousands, surrounded the city, cutting off all supplies and communication. Back in Britain, the public was captivated by the drama. Newspapers ran daily updates on Gordon of Khartoum, turning him into a national icon holding the line against overwhelming odds. The government, under pressure, finally dispatched a massive relief expedition. An epic journey up the Nile River, but it was too little, too late. The relief force fought its way through brutal desert skirmishes, inching closer to Khartoum. But just 2 days before they arrived, the Mahdi's forces breached the city's defenses in a final, desperate assault. The city fell, and General Gordon was killed. The failure to save him was a national humiliation for Britain. The invincible empire had been defeated not by another great power, but by a holy warrior and his followers in the middle of the desert. The war didn't end there, of course. The British would eventually return with overwhelming force and crush the Mahdist state years later. But for a time, in the sands of Sudan, the Mahdi and his army had achieved the impossible. They had won a war the British couldn't. It was a stark reminder that firepower and technology don't always guarantee victory against sheer will, faith, and knowledge of the land. This conflict became a defining moment, a bloody chapter in the story of empire that is often forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into the surprising corners of military history. See you next time.